Well, we have an In Focus exclusive today, Demiaki.
Yes.
Africa reporter, rather Daybreak Africa reporter Peter Clote's interview with Jacob Zuma of ANC in South Africa.
Vincent, I think a lot of people will be very interested in hearing what he has to say.
That's a good one. But first, earlier this week, Zuma, the leader of South Africa's ruling party, learned that he could be headed back to the court on charges of corruption. A judge on Wednesday allowed the state to appeal his court's ruling last month that stopped Zuma's prosecution. Zuma is the African National Congress presumptive candidate for president in next year's election and is widely expected to win. He was in Washington this week for talks with officials and business leaders. He told VOA that if elected president, he has no intention of changing the current South African administration's policies.
In South Africa, it is the political parties that put across their policies and people vote on the basis of the policies of the parties. Presidents are given the task to undertake and implement those policies. In the main, therefore, it might not rely entirely to an individual person. But the question is, will the individual persons be able to implement the policies? Of course, we've been saying to people, with regard to the ANC will always decide that its president is a president that will implement his policies. They'll be the first to worry if they thought that the person was not going to implement their policies as an ANC. And we have therefore been ascertaining to people that, assuring them that there's nothing that's going to change.
You recently said that the ANC will create jobs for the poor. How pragmatic is this?
The ANC has been talking about that challenge all the time. I think it's a question of saying, how do you prioritize these? The resolutions that have been taken at our conference are very specific. We have specifically and deliberately said the jobs, the economic policies that we are going to implement as we move forward should emphasize on job creation, decent jobs. That's what we have decided to do. We have, for an example, prioritized education, which is one of the basic critical area for the poor, because, as you know, the apartheid identified education as an important instrument to deprive people any empowerment, particularly education. And we have to identify it as an important liberating tool so that we then educate people. By educating people, we're actually empowering them. We are also making them to be able to find better job, to be skilled, also to be able, the population generally, to be able to be the creators of jobs rather than job seekers only, so that you change the balance, so to speak. So our policies have been that we have got to look at what are the critical things. For an example, we have said we need rural development to take the economy to the rural area.
Let's focus on Zimbabwe. We all know that the collapse of Zimbabwe would have an adverse effect on South Africa because people will be trooping to South Africa for good living. How do you think Zimbabwe should be put back? Or where should Zimbabwe be?
Well, I think there is a process in Zimbabwe that is taking place. As you know, that having gone through very trying kind of situation with regard to the elections, finally there were negotiations that were mediated by the former President Mbeki, finally agreed to have an arrangement that stipulates the power sharing kind of arrangement. But of course the problem is that whilst the power sharing agreement is on the table, they've got difficulty to implement it, probably because some final points they are not agreeing. Now the process is on to try to do that, and I've been informed that on Monday there will be a meeting in Zimbabwe organized by the Troika of SADC to try to bring this matter to a close.
Is the ANC in crisis?
No, the ANC is not in crisis. There are individuals within the ANC who are dissatisfied, who are therefore deciding or saying they are going to move out of the ANC. It's not a crisis.
Interesting interview, and that's our top story. What do you think about it? We want to hear from you. So send us an email at africatv@voanews.com.